Hi, and welcome to this episode of Bloodhound Pix for Horror Not Fear. I am one of your hosts, Craig.
I'm Kyle.
And I'm Josh.
Okay, well, this episode we're going to do something a kind of get to know you, well, get to know us type segment where instead of talking about our favorite horror movies or what we consider the best horror related movies to be, we are discussing on our own creative ventures which horror movies or works in general have kind of had a big influence on us in our own writing, either through the style itself or the content or whatever it may be, but all across the board. So so we can begin. And should we go like one at a time, or let's just do the whole
Let's
list?
do roundtables.
Okay, let's do a round table. Okay, so the first one I do not have. I'll start with my honorable mentions, and one of them that I wrote is just kind of a generic subgenre, and it's the British black comedy, the macabre British black comedy, specifically seen in such movies as Sightseers by Ben Wheatley. There's a lot of his stuff actually probably is in that his earlier work, but there's Lindsay Anderson's trilogy of Mick Travis, which is known through the movie If, Oh, Lucky Man, and Britannia Hospital. Have always been a big one. And yeah, there's a slew of other kind of British black comedy. There's League of Gentlemen is a great show. And then there's also surprisingly Monty Python's Meaning of Life, which has more silly moments but gets rather dark at times. And it's a great one to kind of watch. So that's my first kind of honorable mention, I guess, before I get into my top five.
Okay.
And now and now Ben Wheatley's gonna make the Meg 2.
Really?
Yeah, I saw that. He is.
Yes. It's like
I
I don't think that's the greatest use of his talent.
Well, that's the sense because he did that.
Free
So I like
fire.
Ben Wheatley up until I even liked High Rise, and I'll talk about that movie in a second. Well, not the movie, the book, but um, and then he did Free Fire, and he just did that Rebecca new adaptation,
And he's
and
doing the Tomb Raider reboot.
yeah, and for some reason I think he's
Like
just one
what
of
the
those.
fuck?
Yeah, he's one of those directors that work. I don't know. I feel work better when he is like working independently, can just use his own because he has such a kind of unique perspective and voice that when he's put under, a big budget where there's studio and all of that, I don't know. It's like they're trying to shape him into something he's not. Free Fire seems like it's like a Tarantino wannabe movie, which you see his stuff prior to that, and it's great, and it has again this very unique voice, and then to see it then go into I don't know something, not to say as generic as that, but yeah,
It's like he woke up one day and he's like, "Man, this is cool and everything, but I want to be paid."
yeah, that's what it is.
Probably what happened.
And who gives a shit? I'm gonna sell out, and I'm gonna make sure everyone is well aware. I'm gonna do the
I know,
Meg 2.
I know he was doing a bunch of, but that was before he kind of did Free Fire. Did like Doctor Who episodes and stuff like that. I don't watch Doctor Who, but yeah, I know that was a big thing.
Well, that's sad. Is he gonna come off your list now? Do you have to change?
I know.
Cross him off?
Yeah, I have to get rid of my Field in England tattoo.
No shit. You better get that covered up.
I know. So Kyle, what is your honor, whatever your list may be?
Honorable mention. I mean, I guess I can say Scorsese, since we're a horror podcast and we don't want to go too far into this pool, but yeah, all of his films, just the gritty atmosphere, especially something like Taxi Driver, which is kind of like you could almost make an argument that Taxi Driver is like a weird precursor to something like Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, in like this just dark character study, gritty exploitation style. But just the energy of all of his films, I feel like he was the first filmmaker that I was kind of aware of. Like, oh, this is a director, this is a filmmaker, this is someone that, like, not to get into all the auteur theory bullshit, but you know, it's like he's the reason you're going to see the film sometimes more than anything else. It's just like, oh, this guy made it. Okay, I want to see what it is because there's something in his filmmaking style that's so energetic.
Great. Okay. So Josh, you're next. Or your whatever your however your list may be ordered.
Yeah, my list isn't ordered in any way. My list sucks.
Mine too.
So I'm the first one I'll mention is, you know, probably the least interesting and most generic bullshit a person that writes horror stories can mention, and that would be Stephen King. I mean, it's just inevitable. So, you know, he's obviously, his last name is pretty indicative of his kind of stature in terms of horror stuff. It's kind of you know, getting a little less impactful in his older age, but you know, at one point there was no one better. So you know, it's been my favorite author for, I don't know, 30 years too. So I don't know that I've ever written anything that's like derivative of any specific thing of his, but you know, it's fair to say without having read, you know, the 30 novels or whatever the number is, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So okay. We'll go with the easy, least interesting one first.
So he's kind of I don't know. He's doing like lately a George Lucas or Steven Spielberg thing, I feel, where he's like going back to all of his old books and adding new endings. Or, well, I heard this new Stand series, or you know, he's making a sequel to kind of explain more, or to not. I know he's talking about making an It sequel, and he rewrote the ending for The Stand specifically for the new series, or the limited series that's coming out.
Did
and then, you know,
did he rewrite the ending in the book itself though, or
no.
did he just So that's, I don't know. It's a different adaptation of the book.
Yeah, but like I don't know, Dr. Sleep and It sequel.
Yeah.
But what is your favorite Stephen King book then?
My favorite book?
Or story, because I know he wrote a ton of short stories too.
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind right when you said that was the novel Gerald's Game. That was definitely one that, you know, I read. I think it came out in like the early 90s. And, you know, back then I was a lot younger and not as angry and shit. And it made I remember it making a real impression. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. I'd have to think about it and to get a, you know. But yeah, that's the one that comes to mind immediately.
Okay. Okay, so the next one on my list, that my honorable mentions, I guess, are kind of in the same way as Kyle's, of the things that can be argued aren't technically horror but have played an impact. So the Obsolescence trilogy, and that is the J.G. Ballard trilogy, also known as Crash, High Rise, and then Concrete Island, has always been has kind of, especially as I get older, has played a bigger part. And they're not really horror. I guess they're always labeled as psychological dramas, but they have this weird dystopian feel, even if they're set in modern day. And yeah, they're kind of a lot of fun. They're very heady, and if you want to just see a movie, or, well, not a movie, but if you want to read a book about either people obsessed with cars, obsessed with a building, or being stuck on a a concrete island between all these different highways, like a Robinson Crusoe book, then check them out because they're great. And I'm surprised Ballard doesn't get as thrown out as much as he does, because he also wrote a ton of kind of great sci-fi.
Yeah, he's one I've always been meaning to read and never gotten around to it, but he seems like he's more influential than he gets credit for, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a couple authors, because there's even Michael Moorcock is like that as well, who wrote the Cornelius trilogy. It's like all these people use a lot of his ideas, but then he doesn't really ever get the credit like others do, I guess. Like Philip K. Dick or somebody, an author like that does.
Which is weird because Philip K. Dick's stuff is a lot more like abstract a lot of times. Yeah. It's good, but it's like you wouldn't think it would be something that would adapt to film very well, honestly.
No.
Yeah, I was just reminded of the fact that I attempted to read a Ballard novel at one point, and I'm looking through my shit right now to find out what it was, and I couldn't make it through it.
Yeah. No, it's because I think it's I don't know, even if you watch the movie adaptations, I don't know if it's because it's British and the way it's set up, but it's very dry in aspects. And it's done, that's why people like Cronenberg, I think, work so well doing in the adaptation, because it's cold in a way, I guess is the way to describe it.
Except for Empire of the Sun.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but that's like a...
Oh, fuck, that might have been the one.
That's the one about his life, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah, dude, I think I made it through like 100 pages of that, and I was like, I think this might be the worst thing I've ever read in my life.
Ouch. Okay. I feel like such a piece of shit. Like, I don't think I have any literary anything on my list, guys.
That's fine.
I'm worthless.
Oh, don't worry, I'm done with that too.
Good. The next one, I guess I'll do Joe Dante, just because like me and my friend used to watch Gremlins just over and over and over and over a million fucking times, and The Burbs, and like The Howling, maybe not as much when I was a kid, but such a good sense of humor that also kind of straddles the line without feeling like it's holding anything back, of being almost like a family-friendly tone. Mm-hmm. Like anybody could watch it, but it's still kind of edgy and funny, and it's not like super calculated to be holding back.
And that, do you like the Homecoming?
I do. I mean, it's on the nose, but I don't know. I still think it's kind of great.
They always market it as the first, film to really give a critique on the Iraq War, I think.
Yeah, I know. They always bring that. I don't know. I mean, I guess film, yes. Not the only thing or person, I guess.
Yeah. And
actually,
I was just going to say, there's a great video that Kyle sent me. I can't remember who does it, but where a guy sings about Gremlins 3. That is hilarious, and you should check it out.
Yes, you should.
I was gonna say I just rewatched The Burbs not too long ago. I hadn't seen it in probably 20 years, and I was just marveled at like how good it is.
It's so fucking great, dude, and all the like.
It is really good.
I wish there was more satanic shit in there, but the satanic hallucinations are amazing.
Yeah, it was really good. I forgot like pretty much all about what was in it, so yeah, it was awesome.
Nice.
Okay, so I guess the next thing that I'll mention is the Twilight Zone.
Yes.
Because fuck, it's the best show ever made. I don't write TV either. I don't even want to ever. But I mean, it's not, again, kind of like my mention of Stephen King. Twilight Zone probably isn't too surprising given, the nature of the genre, meaning writing horror. So I think, obviously, and I'm talking about the original Twilight Zone. I guess there's like 12 different versions of it now, but the original run with Rod Serling is definitely, I think, the best television series ever made. And for me, I'm not saying every episode is amazing or anything. That's never going to be the case with any show, especially one that was 5 seasons. You're going to have some pieces of shit in there, but the ones that are sort of even the ones that are like the most well known, they're the most well known for a reason, and largely it's because the story, whatever it may be, is so damn original. So again, I don't feel like there's a whole lot to kind of try to justify in me saying that the Twilight Zone is a big fucking influence.
Great. So my next one is, again, I guess, honorable mention, if we want to call it that. It will be Grant Morrison's Filth and the Invisibles. These are comic books, obviously, and again, they're not technically horror, so that's why I guess I'm putting them in the honorable mention category, but they are trippy, kind of parallel dimension sci-fi. And those actually, I was talking about Michael Moorcock, and it's funny because Grant Morrison wanted to sue, I can't remember if he did or not, the Wachowskis, because he said that they brought issues of the Invisibles on set for the Matrix, to be like, to the cast, of saying, here's how it's influenced. And it's funny because Grant Morrison wanted to sue them for that, and he directly in the Invisibles uses a character named Gideon Star Chaser, I want to say, or Star Cruiser. I can't. It's been a while since I've read it, but it directly takes from Michael Moorcock's Jerry Cornelius, the Cornelius Quartet, and it's like a blatant ripoff. But besides that, yeah, they're great. They deal with parallel dimensions. They're like punk rock and anarchy and all across the board, and I'm there for it. So yeah, Grant Morrison's work in general. He also did Happy, which I know they made the series out of it, which was a lot of fun with Christopher Maloney. And Nameless is we've talked about on prior episodes, but yeah, it's always very intense, his stuff.
More shit I need to read.
Yeah.
I guess my next thing is gonna be splat stick horror comedy, so I don't have to just talk about one of them, but like Evil Dead 2, Dead Alive, early Peter Jackson, early Sam Raimi, all of that shit I love, and I think it's some of the best shining examples of horror comedy that there is, that so many people fail at, but those guys just nail it every time. And it's stuff that I hope to match if I'm ever writing horror comedy sometimes. I mean, I'm never going to get that close, but
We can hope. And mine will come up too. I talk about that as well. But Josh, what's yours?
So the next thing I'll mention is another TV show, which is fucking ironic as hell because I'll never write TV shows. This show is the second best show ever created. That's Tales from the Crypt.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Friends.
No, that's the third best. Friends is number 3. Tales from the Crypt. Yeah. So first thing to mention is the adaptation of the EC Comics is pretty damn flawless, for one thing. I've read every EC comic, probably multiple times. So fuck, we can just mention that too. Both the comic and the show. And not just Tales from the Crypt. I'm talking Haunt of Fear. I'm talking Weird Science. You know, there's others too. There's so many different kind of brands. Vault of Horror. But again, I think in terms of the show, in terms of the Tales from the Crypt show, you know, Kyle just mentioned Splat Stick. That's something that Tales from the Crypt did mainly, you know, phenomenal every time they did it. And you know, not every show was funny. Sometimes they were really demented, serious, you know, whatever the story, you know, that they were using was going to be or was. And sort of similar to the Twilight Zone example, you know, stories that were adapted, you know, coming from a 7-page comic, they just always did such a great job, especially when you kind of compare, you know, the 7-page comic to the 22 to 24 minute episode. They were just always they were always amazing. And again, you know, clearly not every you know, that's a 7-season show. I gotta say that the 1st and 7th seasons are
They're
borderline awful. Yeah. But you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I mean, those are all just fucking so good. So Tales from the Crypt, yeah, the show and the whole EC comics brand. So there, I just killed 2 with 1 stone.
I guess so. To piggyback off of that, that was actually. I'll wait to then talk about the Splat Stick since you just talked about Josh. Yeah, I have EC Comics and Tales from the Crypt in the same category. I guess I could. Why not? The other one I had to just cover as well is Evil Dead, and I think all of the EC Comics, Tales from the Crypt, and Evil Dead having that Splat Stick element, and or just that kind of comedic tone. There's something that when I was going through this list that I think they've become so ingrained in me that I don't think about them anymore. Especially, we were able to talk with Mad Monster about Evil Dead, and you know, I've spoken about that a lot, and you know, the idea of coming from Michigan, and it's like, oh, if you're a horror fan, you have to like Raimi, and that, you know, it becomes this big thing for some reason. And so yeah, it just became this whole like, part of my horror being, if we want to call it that. But yeah, I will go off of what Josh is saying as well, in that I'm glad he said the first, because you can get back. Or I was worried about getting backlash for that, but yeah, the first is rough, and the 7th is, because the 7th they switched to, it was a different production company in England or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's right.
But there are, it's probably my most watched series. It's one of those ones, Tales from the Crypt. Same with Evil Dead or Dead Alive or movies like that are the ones I'm more likely to just pop in at any time if I just want background noise, or if I want to watch something I don't want to sit there and skim through all the different streaming sites at all. But however, one popping up that is slowly taking the lead that's not on this list is The Guest. I don't know why, but I've been watching. That's one that I'll pop on a lot, and I don't. It's just a fun watch, especially now since it's Halloween.
Yeah, it's just one of the best movies ever. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah, shit. I feel like I should have mentioned Tales from the Crypt. I love that too. You know, I think all you guys left out here was maybe Goosebumps, R.L. Stine. Just kidding. But I did read those when I was a kid.
So did I.
Say cheese and die.
It was an easy one to read too, because it was like you would have reading assignments in school, and you could be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna read Goosebumps," and
dude, and
you know, you could
read those
burn
like
through those. Yeah,
they're so quick. I guess I'm gonna go with the Universal Classic monsters, because I feel like, I mean, that kind of ties in with Tales from the Crypt and that kind of stuff a little bit. And it's just, sometimes it's nice to go back to stuff like that and see the origins of all these archetypal monsters and characters. And especially nowadays when everything has become so extremely meta and reference heavy sometimes that it can just be kind of exhausting. It's nice to go back to things that are original.
I've actually been rereading a lot of, speak of that classic kind of either gothic horror stories or, as you know, as those listening, we've talked a lot about, we will write for Ginger Nuts of Horror sometimes as a group. That's how we kind of got started. And as Jim McLeod will say, very British horror, where the concept is that there's not the flash. It's not like the jump scares or the, whatever it may be, the bombastic nature. It's instead this this dread throughout and this tension, and and sometimes having that breath and having that kind of tension is more eerie than, yeah, sure, you might jump if something quickly flashes on the screen, but then it doesn't sit with you the way that some of these old eerie ghost tales might.
I agree. All right, Josh, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, Josh. So the next thing for me, this is fucking hard, man. The next thing for me, it would be to mention my screenwriting hero, which is Lee Winnell. I don't try to do anything the way he does. That's like trying to do something like David Lynch. It's just not going to work. But, I could even say, clearly, if you don't know who Lee Winnell is, I don't know what you're doing listening to this, but I could say, too, like, even more specifically, I've kind of been influenced a little too heavily by Upgrade. I think it's probably one of my favorite movies easily ever.
We did an episode on it, and Josh talking about it.
We did an episode on it that got fucking deleted.
We can still redo it, Josh.
Oh, we're not redoing it. That magic is gone.
Okay.
So yeah, Lee Winnell, without question. Obviously, he's responsible for Saw. He's responsible for Insidious. He's responsible for Upgrade. The dude is.
He wrote the Cooties.
He did something with that. I don't know the extent of it, but and he's an actor too, which he should give up. But
he's not bad.
I guess. I think with the what he's doing in scripts is nothing is ever recycled, but you can tell that it's a Lee Winnell script because he always kind of does some end stuff magic that you don't ever really see coming, and it seems to be prevalent in pretty much everything that he's written. So yeah, dude's a genius. So yeah, Lee Winnell for me.
Yeah, he's great, especially Upgrade. Like what you're talking about, just in terms of, especially nowadays, making a sci-fi action movie that you can tell someone who like loves RoboCop and those kind of movies made, but it's not annoyingly going like, I like RoboCop. Did you see I threw it? You know what I mean? Like he can get all that in there while still being original, which most people can't fucking do.
That's true. And that script is so, like, especially for him, that's the story is just so bare bones and so simple, but it's definitely like something that you would find in the 80s. And then to kind of put the Lee Winnell stamp on it, it's got that crazy ending that it's just like, damn, yeah, it's fucking brilliant.
Yeah, and what's nice about it too is kind of going back off of what Kyle was saying, of paying homage to it, but without the constant reference or in your face, like, oh, look at us. It doesn't because so many movies now will use, it's like they'll use the Carpenter score, and they'll even use the Thing or Carpenter title sequence. It's like they try so hard to just straight mimic that it does get, especially now, being that everybody's doing it, it gets a little rough.
Well, it's just like you're also like, I'll just go watch The Thing,
Yeah,
and it'll be better than your movie. Sorry, like.
yeah. Okay, so my next one is actually, so it's a weird, it was 1950s sci-fi horror, such as the Body Snatchers, The Blob, The Fly, movies like that. However, it's the ideas of those are the remakes, so it's not actually the 1950s Fly, but the Cronenberg Fly, or the 1978 Body Snatchers, or even the 1988 Blob.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of those kind of 50s ideas when they, I guess, move forward, and a lot of those 50s ideas work as well. But yeah, talking about either nuclear, I don't know, growth, or talking about the ecological aspect of horror and stuff like that, and how it's affecting the world some way or another. It's always a lot of fun. I like using those ideas a lot.
Cool. This is, Josh said it's fucking hard. I agree.
Well, these are the next two are my easy ones that I reference constantly. So,
well, good for you, Craig. I guess 70s exploitation horror, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Last House on the Left and stuff like that. I love just because it's so. I mean, a lot of it is also critiquing the Vietnam War and the documentary style footage that people would see on TV of people getting killed, kind of the loss of innocence for a generation of our country. But I love that stuff. It's another thing people try to mimic so much, and you just cannot do it. I mean, one of the reasons you can't do it is 16 millimeter film just looks, just feels like grimy and disgusting and real, and no matter how much you try to copy that, you just can't do it. Maybe Rob Zombie's the only person that's got anywhere close at all, but he almost relies on it too much. Or,
yeah.
I guess he's been forced into that corner now of like, that's all people want him to do.
Yeah, I don't know. I just told you, Kyle, but I finally watched 3 from Hell,
Yeah.
and it made me just kind of wish he was able to do his hockey comedy, or
Or the
to try
Marx
something
Brother
new
movie, or
Yeah.
just anything.
Because when he finally had the opportunity to experiment with things like Lords of Salem or movies like that, he was able to show he can actually make other movies, not just the whatever they call them, the hillbilly something, I don't know, torture porn or whatever they label Rob Zombie as. But
Yeah.
okay, Josh.
I'll just mention another one of my screenwriting heroes, which would be Justin Benson. I think the scripts for Resolution, The Endless, are fucking phenomenal. And I feel like we tend to think along the same lines in terms of plot. That means that synchronic is probably the thing I most want to see, and I don't know if it's going to happen, but yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities in the kind of ways that we think about stories, and the only thing that I didn't really like was their film Spring. I don't know why. It just didn't work for me. But everything else I think is phenomenal. Like, I love Resolution. I love The Endless. So yeah, Justin Benson, I love you, buddy.
It's
To
so
throw a wrench into
Yeah.
that, isn't that Kyle's favorite?
Yeah, I think that's better than the other two. I think
Yeah.
I think the other ones are great. The problem is, to me, anyways, was like Spring was the best actors, whereas the Endless, I know they play
Right.
parts, and Resolution, you can tell it's it's their first movie, so I don't hold it against it, but.
Mm. Yeah, I think I don't dislike Spring, but I think having seen, obviously I saw Resolution. I think I saw them in the order that they were made. So I loved Resolution so much, and then next was Spring, and it's like, Jesus, this is nothing like Resolution.
Yeah, I
But
was gonna say they're very different, and
yeah,
Resolution goes with Endless.
Yeah.
right, yeah. So I mean, I don't have any problem with Spring. It's just that type of, it's obviously it's more of like a romance almost. Obviously with a fucking creature, but yeah, it just didn't work for me as well. And I think that's a big part of it was I just loved Resolution so much, and then that Spring is nothing like that. So it's still good, it's still well made, but yeah, just not for me.
Okay. So my next one, my second to last, is the simple one that I've talked about a lot, but I'll go with, and it's kind of a newer one that I've adapted as I've become over the last several years. But Junji Ito is one that I've kind of had ideas like that a lot throughout, I guess, as long as I've been writing. But he was one of the where I read his work and went, oh, there's somebody that's actually doing, this kind of weird stuff, and this, kind of these plots that seem so simple and so bizarre, but then they're made so disturbing or whatever. And he's doing it, so there's somebody, I guess, like me, or thinking like me in the same way. So it was this nice thing to see. And one I reference a lot is the Enigma at Amagara Fault, which I have the tattoo of, and then Gaio, I think, or Geo.
I think it's
I guess
Gaio.
yeah, that's what I thought. Is the one about, again, explaining it is weird, talking about dead fish on mechanical legs terrorizing Japan. But you read it and it's actually incredibly disturbing, and like I don't know how he does it. It makes you feel, and in an early episode we read one of the comics and talked about it, but he's able to make you feel that kind of, I guess, ickiness even through reading a page, and he's able to incorporate jump scares through a page, which is a hard thing to do, obviously.
Yeah, we definitely are going to talk about him more. I've got the Uzumaki book that I need to read. Yeah. Well, then I got to talk about Japanese horror because I love it so much. There's so much to go into, but two big ones I think are, God, now I'm going to forget, Shinya Tsukamoto, who did, Craig mentioned Haruko the Goblin. He also did Tetsuo the Iron Man, which I love that movie. That's like one of the movies I wish I could have made. It's just so insane. It doesn't make any fucking sense, and it doesn't matter. It's just the most batshit fucking thing you'll ever see.
A lot of time it's considered, for those that haven't seen it, it's nothing like this movie, but it's considered like the Japanese equivalent to Eraserhead or something, where they came out near each other and have that same kind of feel. And
yeah, that's as good a comparison as you're gonna get. I think on the poster it says like David Lynch meets David Cronenberg or something.
Yeah,
which is good too. But and then I mean there's so much, but also on the other end of the spectrum, who we always talk about on the show for no apparent reason is Kiyoshi Kurosawa. But like, and I told Craig I just watched one of his other movies, Seance, which was a harder one to find, but he's a master at creating mood, and he's like one of the people that I am not smart enough to write as well as he does, but he's writing these like effectively creepy, just as kind of a horror movie films, but also with like a deep philosophical thing going on that I'm just like, okay. I should just quit. Like, is this like as good as people get? Because I'm fucking. You're awesome. I suck. I can't write a story that like intelligent. Fuck.
Yeah, I wanted. It was on my, I guess, honorable. I don't know. I was going to mention Paul's just for that sake because, yeah, there's the crappy American remake that uses the jump scare or whatever, and we've talked about it a lot. But yeah, you watch Paul's and it's like it's this movie that there's no jump scares. It's just pure. Even the ghosts move very slow, but yet you watch it and it's absolutely terrifying.
And there's so much other stuff going on.
Yeah.
Like there's philosophy too, and then there's all this other stuff going on. Yeah, it's. How does he do it? I don't know.
Josh.
I'll just continue with my screenwriting buddies, and I go
Neil
with
Marshall Stevens.
Simon Barrett.
Oh, okay.
Simon Barrett. Simon wrote You're Next, and he wrote The Guest,
Which is great. It's amazing.
and he wrote the Blair Witch movie that everyone unfairly shits on. He also has his own directorial debut coming soon. So I'm excited.
Wait.
Yeah, I'm excited as shit for that. I really like Simon's ability to have this really intelligent comedy mixed in with his horror.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to try to do the same thing just because I think deep down all I want to do is really write comedies. So the problem is if it's not funny, it's not going to work. You can have, I think you can write a horror story that may not be the most terrifying thing ever, but it could still be successful. Whereas with comedy, if it doesn't work, there's no like meeting you in the middle. You fail and it's, you're done. But Simon does a really great job of doing both and being really fucking smart about it too. So yeah, You're Next, The Guest, and the unfairly shit on Blair Witch film, and I can't wait for Seance to come out. So
yeah, he's great, and he's interesting one to talk to because he's not talk, but listen to being interviewed because he's because he's very deadpan and he's kind of self-deprecating, and he'll constantly refer to his advice doesn't work at all, but he probably gives some of the best advice for up-and-coming filmmakers or writers, I would say.
By far, yeah. He seems like the most down-to-earth guy ever, and the best writer. Yeah.
So my last one is going to be the obvious one, and I'm going to talk about David Cronenberg.
Finally.
But not, for some reason, the ones that have always stuck with me are most people will reference, Scanners, The Fly, Videodrome, movies like that. And mine are more I have The Brood, which I've talked about a lot, and we've joked about how much I talk about it. But then I would actually go into movies more like Dead Ringers, Crash, which relates back to an earlier one I brought up. But then History of Violence, which I love. I think it's his best movie overall, even though The Brood is my favorite. And Maps to the Stars, I actually think is incredible. And if that was, so far is his last film, but I think it's a perfect way to kind of end, if that is his last film, of saying that Hollywood is this incestuous pool and all that. And it's funny. But as he said, besides The Brood, he considers all of his movies to be comedies. So
what? No love for Eastern Promises?
I like that a lot too. I just for some reason History of Violence is the one I always, maybe because they both have Viggo Mortensen. That's the one I will pop in my head more. But I actually think I watch Eastern Promises more often than History of Violence because
they're both
it's
great.
not. Yeah.
Have you ever read the graphic novel History of Violence?
I started it, but I don't. I think I had to take it back to the library before I
So it's I saw the film first and then read the book. I mean, I have it, but I was astounded at how much Cronenberg toned it down.
Yeah.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fucking brutal.
There's more reading to do.
Yeah.
There you go.
I listen to, as much as I like hearing him talk, I think he's incredibly intelligent. I listen to that commentary on history of violence, and man, not to say anything, that is a boring commentary. Like the whole time he's just talking about Viggo Mortensen. The only real thing you get from it is him saying that he's playing the two, he's basically two characters, even though it's one person, and that's really all I got from it. It's almost like a teacher giving a lecture, a boring lecture or something.
Bummer.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to have to talk about my obvious one, which is Wes Craven. Probably just because he's a fucking master, but it's also like all the films that I've already mentioned too many times, but Scream and Nightmare on Elm Street, Hills Have Eyes, just all these movies that I saw as a kid too before I even really thought about. Shocker, which I didn't see till later. People Under the Stairs, Serpent in the Rainbow.
You don't have to say Shocker if you don't.
I saw it. I didn't see it when I was a kid. I'm throwing shade on it.
Yeah.
But he's one that's kind of a screenwriting hero to me too. That I'll go back to just because everything is so. I feel like he's one of the ones that's so efficient. Like most of those movies are 90 minutes, an hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
But he'll get so much stuff in there, and it works on so many different levels. If you don't want to think about it, you don't have to see any kind of social commentary, but it's there if you're looking for it. I don't know. I
like
think he's
Cursed.
Just a genius. Yeah, Cursed. I mean, which is that whole movie's a commentary on how shitty CGI is, Craig.
Yeah,
it was on purpose. You son of a bitch.
I mean, that's the night. You look at Cronenberg, you look at Craven. I know Josh's last one. What's it gonna be? But I won't say it out loud. But all those directors made these great, efficient movies, and they never really, for the most part, they never breached the 2-hour mark.
Which is kind of astounding considering today everything is like, well, it's got to be 2 hours. Oh, it's just a fucking movie about a guy falling in love with a girl or whatever. It's just. Yeah. There's so many movies I feel like we watch where you're just like, oh, cool. You could have cut out that 20 minutes, you asshole.
Yeah. Okay, Josh, give it to us. Your last one. Well, if it is your last one.
He thinks I'm gonna say John Carpenter.
I do
and
too.
I can't because as much as I love Carpenter, and I should just mention Wes Craven is in the same sentence. They're too smart to influence me. I can't. It's almost impossible. It literally is almost impossible. And I'm all about doing this truthfully. So
there you go.
I can't say John Carpenter. What I was gonna say was another sort of screenwriting hero of mine, which is Mike Dougherty. And I think it's a good way for me to close it out because Mike Dougherty is similar in a lot of ways to Simon Barrett. In he's very smart, and the two things that he's done. I've never seen the Godzilla film he made. I have no interest in that. But Trick or Treat and the Krampus film. He kind of uses these. I mean, Krampus is a little more ridiculous, but they're both kind of ridiculous plots. And they're both smart as hell. Trick or Treat is probably one of the smarter scripts maybe ever. And it's also the best Halloween film ever made. But again, similar to Simon, he inserts this comedy that's just brilliant. brilliantly thought of and very funny, and it's never like something where you're like, wow, that wasn't funny at all, and just, you know, taken out of the moment or whatever. So yeah, I can't wait for him to get back into doing his kind of horror comedy thing. So yeah, Mike Doherty.
Okay. And does anybody else have any more?
I mean, I have to bring up John Carpenter then.
Okay.
I mean, he was definitely on my list, and I was like, well, Josh is clearly going to talk about John Carpenter. I mean, we all love John Carpenter.
Yeah.
For sure. And just, he's probably the only one that does, you know, write, direct, scores the movie. Just so, I don't know, such an iconic 80s director.
Yeah.
And George Romero, honorable mention too, because I love George Romero.
Okay. Is that our lists?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, so if you happen to have or make your own creative work in any aspect and you want to send it our way of telling us who inspires you, feel free. But this is our list, and yeah, thank you for listening.
Bloodhound Pix podcast is part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcast Network. Produced by Josh Lee, Craig Draheim, and Kyle Hintz. Music by Raymond Seed. Editing by Kyle Hintz.